It's been a long couple of days, but I'm very happy that we're here, all friends still. Let's see if we're still friends after this conversation. Hopefully, we get some juicy conversation going. I thought, I mean, you have everybody except Ricardo have given presentations here today, but let's do like a really quick round of introductions. Maybe starting with Christoph and then going this way. Basically, just who are you, what are you working on, and maybe one cool thing that you worked on this year.
Sure. So my name is Christoph Magera. I'm a co-founder and director of engineering at Software Mention. The coolest thing, I think, was the one that I presented today on a talk. It's the ID project that I worked on. Hey, Kadi.
Hi, I'm Kadi. I work at Expo, and I mean, I joined Expo late last year, so I worked on a lot of little things. But I think one of the coolest things was actually I had two kind of in-depth chances to dog food, as in use our own things at scale. So one was the expo.dev/blog, which we built using Expo Router. So it's a website only using Expo Router, so that was a fun experience. And the other one was the mobile app for React Conf, which was also just showcasing a bunch of things and finding a lot of things we didn't know about but difficult.
And hello, I'm Giovanni. I'm developer advocate at Amazon. I had a talk like before about how to develop React Native TV apps. And one of the most excited things that I worked on is actually starting to work with React Native 1.5 years ago, because I was like an native Android engineer, so Java and Kotlin, and like learning this new platform, this new framework was so fun. Yeah.
Hi everyone, I'm Riccardo. I'm a software engineer in the React team at Meta. I work mostly on iOS build system and bringing the new architecture to open source. One of the most exciting things I worked on this year was interoperability layer for Fabric components in the new architecture, and helping pushing bridgeless mode as the new default in the 0.74.
And I'm Britta. I just saw most of you recently, but coming from Shopify on the retail side of things, so for point of sale app. And the thing I'm probably the most proud of the last little while that I've worked on anyways is the UI extensions. So we've been extending through our apps. I work on a platform team, so not only are we doing the design system and the accessibility, but we're also extending those components outwards. So, yeah.
Nice, amazing. Okay, so we have had some questions from Twitter. We also have some questions of our own. But I think let's start with something that I really sensed was a big theme this year, which is that it feels like Expo has finally become the thing in React Native community. Of course, we've had a lot of Expo's speakers, but just the energy, just talking to people in the a hallway track, listening to what the Meta team is saying now, recommending Expo as the kind of default thing, is like, is this the year of Expo? Kadi, good job, I guess, joining the team and immediately just crushing it. What's happened this year that made this finally like the year that Expo seems to be really taking off?
I wouldn't say that it's a thing that happened this year. I would say that this is something that's literally 10 years in the making. So Expo has worked together with Meta, very closely to Meta, with the React Native teams since the React Native was created, literally from 10 years ago. So two of the first React Native open source libraries, for example, were built by a team member at Expo. So the relationship's been going since the beginning. So Expo has always been, the goal of Expo has been to make the React Native dev experience closer to web and more pleasant. So it was always built on top of React Native, so built adjacently. And I think this year, I guess it was last year, the React Native Frameworks RFC, it just kind of formalized the relationship between React Native and a React Native framework. So similarly how in React we have React and React frameworks like Next.js and Remix, with React Native we now have an official separation of the role of React Native and then the React Native frameworks. And Expo was just in a position of already having all the tools to be a framework.
Yeah, one of the questions we've also had, Meta is now officially recommending, Expo as the way to start React Native projects. But Expo is still, it's not free. So how does this work? Some people are sort of, feeling that there might be a little bit of a sort of, like how do you call it, barrier to entry now. How do you think about this, for example, at Meta?
I mean, one very important thing that we always try to highlight of the Expo offering, but I guess that Kadi is also better than me to explain this, but anyway, Expo is mostly open source, and only a few services you need to pay for them, right? So all the recommendation of using a framework is slightly more general than using Expo, right? The reality is that Expo right now is the only framework for React Native, and that's why we are recommending that. But from our side, the most relevant part is the open source offering from Expo.
Yeah, so I think there's two parts of Expo. So there's Expo, the open source framework that you can go on GitHub. You can look at it. You can look at the code base. It includes the Expo SDK. It includes all the dev tools like CNG, pre-build. Like most of Expo is open source. The only part of Expo that is not open source and you might have to pay for is EIS, so the Expo Application Services. And it is completely optional. So the only thing you pay for in EIS is your build time, so building in the cloud like any other CI service, and like hosting time. So if you use updates, like you need to pay for that. But everything you can do on EIS, you can do on your own. So you can use a different CI service. You can build locally. You can self-host updates. We literally have a documentation page telling you how to self-host updates if you don't want to use EIS. And actually, all the EIS commands, so the ones that I showed in my talk, you can run on your local machine if you just add --local at the end. So if you use Expo, you don't have to pay for it. It is completely optional.
I feel like a lot of those kind of comments is basically like some misunderstanding from the side of people who are commenting on that. And as Kadi explained, I think it's something that perhaps Expo could communicate better, because when you go to Expo site, I mean, there is like a pricing button there, of course, and because they need to make money in some ways, of course. And but like if you transition from the CLI to Expo, there is nothing really that you get from the CLI and you wouldn't be getting from Expo for free. And as far as I remember, maybe Ricardo would know that better, but I think the pricing model and all of that kind of related things was a part of the RFC. It was like discussed there, like the framework that Meta would be willing to recommend needs to have those type of features. And
yeah, we are working, like Nicola made a great job writing the RFC. We highlighted what are the responsibility of like React Native core, what are the responsibility of a framework, and we were working with all the community to bring some of the or parts of the most relevant comments inside core. So one of our colleagues is working on creating a package that other framework developers can use to build a framework on top of it if they don't want to use Expo. And that will contain the basic stuff that are responsibility of core. And then we are basically offloading to the CLI, which is not going to go anywhere. So if your workflow depends on the CLI, it's going to still be there, accessible to everyone, as Nicola showed yesterday in his talk. And so the CLI is going to stay, or Expo CLI, you can use that as well. But like the main purpose of the RFC was to neatly and cleanly divide what are the core responsibility and what are the framework responsibility. And it's on Meta to make sure that the core responsibility part is done properly, and on the frameworks, of course, to implement the frameworks part.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add, if anyone's interested in like a more in-depth overview of how this decision was reached, I do recommend watching the keynote for day 2 at React Conf, when me, Ricardo and Nico, we kind of talked in depth about all the new things in React Native, but then also how React Native frameworks came to be, and like the role of frameworks and Expo and kind of the separation. So it gives a better overview than we can in a panel.
Well, I think that mention of that keynote, I think, is a great jumping off point to the other big thing that everybody is now talking about. I believe at the keynote, they announced that the new architecture is finally in beta and it's usable. So number one, congratulations. That's been a very long time coming. Can we have a round of applause for the team?
It was a community effort. Like everyone helped, and we are really grateful.
It certainly has taken a village. I feel like I don't know when the project actually started, but I feel like it's been one of those forever projects. So it must be good to finally get it out there. So could you tell us a little bit about like what the current status is, and how do you feel people can interact with it, start migrating, and then I would love to also talk to Amazon and then Shopify folks about like how do they think about eventually getting on the new architecture.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, the current status is that the new architecture is in beta. We think that is stable enough for everyone to start using it and testing it. We had some hints from like even Twitter of people trying to use it also in production, and everything seems to work fine. The reason why we were able to reach this point now is because of like several factors. First of all, we internalized all the feedback that we got in previous version of React Native. We let you try out the new architecture starting from 0.68 behind a feature flag, and like at the time the feedback that we received the most was that it required too much work to like migrate, right? Libraries maintainers have to do a lot of work to migrate the code. Apps need a lot of work to migrate the code. So starting from there, we work on backward compatibility for the APIs, so you could still use in the new architecture old architecture's API, and they should work. We work on interoperability layers to let you use legacy component and legacy modules in the new architecture. I'd like to make an example. We tested React Native Maps, which is a pretty complex library and is working in the interoperability layer, so that's a good signal. And then like the people at Expo, and thank you, Brent, for like coordinating all that amazing work, tested all the Expo modules with the new architecture and bridgeless mode, and also created a list of the most popular libraries and reach out to maintainer, ask the community to test it out. This helped a lot of finding several bugs in core that we use as a starting point to fix core so that everyone can try to turn on the new architecture. And our expectation is that you don't have to change a single line of code and everything should work smoothly. Of course, it's still in beta, so something can go wrong, but that's like the most relevant part for us. Like we want for you to tell us what's not working so that we can fix core so that everyone can migrate to the new architecture more smoothly.
I mean, that's, if it really is a no-change migration, that's an incredible piece of work. Like, Britta, how are you guys at Shopify feeling about it? Like you said, you had 5 different apps on React Native. You must have dozens and dozens of developers, different teams working on it. Is this an effort that you're looking to do now immediately this year? Or is this like more of a long-term plan?
So it sounds like I confirmed with a few of the other teams just to make sure I was giving the right information. But so it sounds like Inbox and Balance are smaller apps. They have fewer people on the teams, and they've actually are well in the way of the migration to 74 and the new architecture. The Green app, which is like our main flagship app, they have started. When it comes to Flash List, we had attempted to do the migration over. We found a regression, and so we're actively working on fixing that. POS hasn't started that process, but that kickoff's coming very shortly. So that's kind of the state of where we are with all of that.
And Giovanni, I mean, you have even like more complicated requirements because you're working with these out-of-band platforms like TV, for example.
Yeah. First of all, I want to take a step back, even talking about Expo, that since the beginning of this year, it supports actually the TV platform. So I'm really appreciated these things that you can actually create a TV project for Android TV, Fire TV, and tvOS with the Expo command line, and then it support the pre-build, the configuration of the TV app. So this is amazing. It make it everything easier. And then talking about the new architecture, yeah, it's a big thing. Finally, it's in beta. And as Amazon, like supporting, like helping developers to support Fire OS, that is like the operating system that is like powering our devices. That means that developers can really rely on, for example, for feature like in-app purchases or push notification to the Google Play services, they have to use our SDKs. And we are usually offering developers the native libraries, so like the Android actual SDKs. And there is a community effort that is super important to create packages that integrates inside the feature of Amazon in-app purchases for Fire OS. And like even here, like we are helping and supporting the community to, we are more than happy to even support more and more packages, like for example, porting these packages, this library to the new architecture. So these are really important things that we can do, like offering help to the communities. Yeah.
No, and it's really good also to see that big companies like Amazon and Shopify are sort of like pitching in. We were having a conversation earlier with James Ede from Expo, and he made like the great point that if you look at the collective contribution, financial contribution of like the platform vendors to native development, so Google to Android and Apple to iOS, that outweighs, like it's so much more than all of the money in the React Native ecosystem. So and money is fundamentally still the leverage that moves the world. So it's really good to see this investment happening. And maybe I'll personify this question to Christoph. I know you don't represent the whole open source community, but you're really active in this. Is like, how does it work on, now that you have still so many packages in the ecosystem that are basically maintained by smaller companies or even like individuals with literally $0 budget? How are they responding to this, for example, the new architecture and migrating and just generally keeping up with an ecosystem that seems to be just getting more and more professional and industrial? And does the open source ecosystem still stay healthy?
Yeah, so one important aspect when discussing this is that the ecosystem is like really very fragmented. Like there are so many libraries. Like at Software Mentioned, we've been approached many times already, and we even help Expensify migrate to new architecture. So that it's always the process starts, from looking at the dependency list, because migrating the app is something that we need to do regardless. But then the dependencies, it's like the varying level of difficulty to do that, right? And so, and the fragmentation here is a real problem because there are like tons of libraries that don't necessarily like do a lot, but you still use them. So the question is like whether you actually want to migrate that library if the maintainer is actually still actively doing that. And in many cases it's basically like that. Like people abandon projects, and I mean it's difficult to blame them because they're they're individuals. They're not really making any profit from those contributions. It varies. So there are some smaller projects where people are still actively contributing. Maybe they are using it for their own purposes. So that's kind of an additional motivation from the financial one. For us, it's as Software Mentioned, it's easier because we have a we figure out a way of funding the team. We now have like 20 people working on open source, and it's kind of creates a good balance with our product work, and feel like it's a right thing to do. But I think one interesting idea was that we were just discussing earlier with Kadi, was the spreadsheet. I think spreadsheet idea that Brent from Expo initiated. Not sure who was the initiator of that idea, but it essentially collected like the top popular libraries and then like to keep track on the migration status for both bridgeless mode and the new architecture. And there is like a CLI tool that Alec from Software Mentioned wrote that just like you can run it on your project, and it scans through the dependencies and tells you like if it's ready for the migration yet. And I think like just the migration bit also could be an opportunity for the ecosystem to get like a little bit of a cleanup of all those tiny libraries that just can be replaced by something else, maybe, because it's, some of those libraries don't necessarily they're not necessary any longer. Like the framework improved. There are some are just like for historical reasons. So, and maybe Kadi can talk a little bit more about that spreadsheet idea. Huh?
I was going to add that with migrating, it's like it's hardest to go first. So the fact that you migrated Expensify and you were one of the first to do a really big app, and you migrated all the dependencies to use new architecture. But all of these dependencies, all these libraries now support new architecture. And like you mentioned, so at Expo, Brent was leading this work, but basically we took 400 of the most installed dependencies from EAS build, so most installed open source libraries, and took the ones with native code, and basically reached out to the maintainers to encourage and offer help to help them migrate to the new architecture. So support both old and new architecture. And in a lot of the cases, we raised the pull request to actually do the migration for them. So of those 400 libraries, most of them now support it. Actually, and all of the Expo modules supported. I think it's 99.9%. I think the only library that is in the top usage and isn't supported in new architecture is React Native Firebase. And we do actually have a pull request out to add support to new architecture. So if anyone knows the maintainer, encourage them to merge that pull request. But yeah, with Expo, you can use a config plugin to enable new architecture. So it's definitely ready to be tried out. Oh, and if you have feedback, so on the React Native working group, if something isn't working, if you Google React Native working group, there is a thread for new architecture, bugs and support, and you can just post there. We'd like to investigate and help you.
Yeah, just wanted to first say another thank you to Software Mention for all the amazing work that they were doing, migrating to the new architecture, a lot of critical libraries. You were one of the first migrating libraries, and React Native Screen, everyone used it, basically Reanimated, everyone used it, so it was an amazing job. And second, for what I can see personally from working with the community every day, I think that the community is in a very good spot right now. From Meta, we have more people than before that are interacting with the community, which is good because it's healthy and helpful for everyone. And also, we are looking into the stability of our APIs. We have internally a whole thread of work to understand what we can do to make sure that APIs are not going to break as often as in the past. And that should be even more helpful for the community in keeping up and reduce migrating costs and stuff like that.
Nice, amazing. I mean, I think we could talk about the new architecture for the rest of the time, but maybe we can also branch out to some other topics. I know that this is heavily on people's minds, but maybe it'll be on people's minds next year still, so we can continue this conversation then. I wanted to, firstly, I would just say to Christoph, the React Native IDE project is so impressive. I mean, your demo was incredible. Not only the jokes, but the entire the actual product. So I'm really glad that you're working on it, because I, personally, have been working a lot more on the web recently. I feel the tooling ecosystem is far ahead when it comes to the actual developer experience on a day-to-day basis. And what I understand is that, a lot of companies have their own in-house tools that they use for different parts. I'm sure that Meta, Shopify, Amazon, you have, different tools that you use. So it's really good to see that, there's now an open offering. But I would like to sort of maybe hear from all of you is hey, what tools do you use in your personal development workflow that you really love that people may not be using, and maybe something that you use in-house at companies that you wish that were open source and everybody could be benefiting from. Anybody can start, or I can assign roles.
I mean, I can start. Actually, we've been really, really encouraged to include AI in a lot of our tooling. So we have a couple instances actually of different AI. We use Copilot, and it's sped us up quite a bit. I initially was a little bit scared, obviously, seeing everything pop up. I'm sure everyone had that initial reaction when they saw what AI could do. and that this is being the stupidest version of AI, right? But yeah, it's very much encouraged, and it's become such a common tool, which is so different from where I was sitting last year. And that big shift. I mean, we also have other internal tools, like Dev is our most famous, but I think AI has made the biggest impact, and in multiple different ways. So it has caught us off guard a couple times, though, too. So you do have to be careful. And that's actually one thing where I find we're still trying to ramp up and find solutions to ramp up some of the junior devs to be able to see the mistakes in AI.
Yeah, I would say that the AI are the most innovative tools that you can use straight away now. No, even Amazon has offerings about this. A part of our own internal tools, of course, I cannot disclose, but yeah, we have the Amazon queue that can be integrated with VS Code, so this would be something it makes the developer experience easier. It makes the developers' day-to-day job easier for sure. Yeah, but I'm more than happy to see open products that improve that experience. The ID. So,
Yeah, I mean, this is uncharted territory. We actually didn't prepare for this conversation at all, but this brings up a really great point. There's tons and tons of React Native code that is out there. There's good code, there's bad code, but there's a huge amount of training data. So could something like React Native IDE also, provide maybe a better bespoke sort of code generation or code understanding intelligence kind of things? Or are you, as a team, not interested in looking into that, Christoph?
It's not like we're not interested in that. We have limited capacity for it even right now, and the biggest focus for us is to get the tool to be stable enough for people to use. And I think a lot of people don't realize how, and this is also going to be about fragmentation, how fragmented all the people's projects are, and use different setups, and use different configuration for Babel, for Metro. And IDE really needs to control the whole pipeline. So the biggest challenge for us is to really be able to give you that experience that you can actually open the project and get it running without additional configuration. So that's kind of the biggest challenge, and something that's really taken up a lot of our time right now. Maybe AI could potentially even help with this thing. I don't know. Yeah, but definitely there are some interesting areas where we can plan some AI enhancements. This is not in the works, but even the fact that you have the visual kind of representation of the UI because it's kind of integrated in the VS Code can help that. You can imagine drawing on the phone and then getting components built for you, or that type of features.
Yeah, what I'm hearing there is a lot of free ideas for anyone who wants to explore and just try out wacky things to go. I think we are now at that sort of Cambrian explosion of hosted APIs are powerful and sort of good enough for at least prototyping. Is that with just a few $100 you can probably build out a proof of concept that you can go and then raise 10 million from Sequoia and spend the rest of your 20s trying to make into reality. What about the other internal tools, like for example, Meta? Is there anything interesting cooking there, or is everything already in open source?
So for the one of you that were at React Native EU last year, you heard about the debugger. We are working on that. There is not much that I can say at the moment. There will be probably news coming later.
Maybe we can reverse the question such that it's easier for the folks here to answer and ask about what are tools that are available in Expo ecosystem or in IDE that they would like to have at their companies.
I'm sorry, actually, I did not hear that question properly. We haven't.
I think it was asked the audience.
Yeah. Sorry? No, I was thinking about asking the guys here, but reverse the question, not ask about the tools that they have at their companies that they'd like to give it to the public, but reverse it and ask about the things that for example Expo already provides, or the IDE provides, and that they would use at their companies if they were available.
That's a really good question. Would you like my job? Would you like to come sit here and ask?
Yeah, we can swap seats.
No, but that is a really good question. Does anybody have an answer to that? Are there anything that you wish that you could use that is been presented here, for example, that you cannot, or?
I mean, the plugin that I tell the most of so I do mentoring a lot at Shopify as well, and the plugin that I always tell someone that I'm pairing with to install, if they don't already have it connected, is like Git Lens, because a lot of our context is in our GitHub issues, and like that's the biggest. I know it's a VS Code plugin is like mostly what we're using. So, but it's that is so much of the context is on the GitHub issues, and so getting to those fast is kind of the nicest thing because there's so many people working in the app at one given time, and with the layoffs that had happened in recent years, sometimes that context is not at Shopify anymore, and hopefully it's in the GitHub issues. So.
I'm an iOS engineer as background, so one of the tools that I like to use the most when I need to debug UI stuff is the layout inspector in Xcode. That's pretty powerful, works pretty well also on React Native already. Like you can see the base class of your components in native side. So that's pretty useful. Another tool that we are using, and is actually connected with our kind of internal things, is flashlights on nightlies. So that's pretty helpful for us to spot regressions. So if from one day to the other we see that nightlies performance are worse, we don't have to maybe go back 1 month of commits, but we only have 1 day of commits to inspect. That's pretty helpful. It saves us a lot of time.
Yeah, I want to insist on flashlight because I use it a lot to analyze the performance of the TV apps on the actual hardware, on the actual TVs, the different ones, and it's pretty useful, pretty fast to use. So it's one of my favorite.
Nice. I'm actually going to jump to a different topic now, just because we don't have that much time left, and I wanted to talk about the TV stuff, or just more broadly, actually. It's super exciting how many sort of other platforms seem to be maturing now. A couple of years ago, I was at my first App.js, and there was a talk about the tvOS stuff. And yes, it looked exciting, but it was also a super crude demo that I didn't feel like I would be comfortable as an engineer shipping into production, at least at the time. But now it seems to be there. So are we there? Is this the year of React Native on TV, or React Native at VR, or React Native in space? Where are we going with these sort of third platforms?
So I think for TV, React Native is pretty mature. So in the TV environment, we have a big problem is the fragmentation. We were thinking that the fragmentation was an issue with the devices that we are normally have in our pockets, not smartphone, tablets. Okay, tablets not in the pockets, but the TV is crazy. You have different OS, different of course screen and way of inputting in the device or with the controller that are all different between producers. And actually, we see that with React Native TV, you can tackle this and fix this fragmentation pretty easily, I would say. Of course, you need some customization here and there to support the different OS. I showed before, the same project that you can build for Fire TV, it can be used on LG WebOS, building with Expo, the web packages, and then, of course, using the LG WebOS package, deployer and launcher. But with a little bit of modification, you can, with React Native tvOS now, create a pretty decent TV apps. And it's pretty crazy, some years ago it was more trickier. And of course, talking about TV is not only the things that we have in the living room, but if we think in the biggest, if we have a big vision around TV, we can talk about media apps, streaming apps, that of course can run on the VR headset or in the car also, because what you have now in the car system, infotainment system is actually almost can be talked like a TV, okay. It has not to be distracting for the user, you can enable some feature only when it's parked, something like that. So, yeah, React Native is there. And even we have partners Eric showed in the presentation, NFL, that is using React Native TOS to develop a really good app across different platforms.
Nice. Yeah, the other, big, I guess, shift other than, AI this year seems to be that, the new VR headsets are just getting better and better and better. I know that, Meta, you are in that business as well. Is there anything you can say about the state of React Native there?
I mean, as Gadi remind everyone here, I suggest and invite everyone to have a look at the React Conf keynote of day 2. Nico was talking about how we use React Native internally at Meta. There is a slide on the deck on how we use React Native to implement the store across all our devices, including the VR. I'm talking about the VR store specifically in this case, including, of course, implementing the VR store on the Oculus. The Quest, sorry.
Nice. So it seems like the future is bright for React Native developers. We are going places, and I'm sure that we're all going to be here next year. I hope I get invited back after this dismal performance. But what would you like to sort of see to happen in the next year in the React Native community, or maybe even broadly, like in your own job, the things that you're working on? Like what is highly successful next year look like, and where are we? What are we going to be talking about, et cetera, 1 year from now?
I would like to have an AI agent that helps you to convert your library in the new architecture. Maybe. I'm kidding. Yeah, and of course, like a more and more improved developer experience for sure. This will happen. Yeah, I think this is the most important things. Like the more the developer experience is good, the more developers are jumping on board in using this framework. The more developers are happy. The users are happy as well because you are developing like really good apps. So yeah, developer experience. I'm pointing everything on that.
I might sound as a broken disk, but to me the most exciting thing that might happen in 1 year time is the new architecture is there, is stable, everybody's using that, and is working well.
Is that about, I'm sorry, actually I haven't watched the keynote from React Conf. Is that about the timeline you're looking at realistically, or do you have a timeline on that?
We have a timeline. We cannot really share it right now, but like if in a 1 year time that's the situation, it means that everything went pretty well and according to our plans.
Yeah, just for the record, I did try to get Ricardo drinking before this so he could blow all of the secrets, but I couldn't get him to do it. I think he's very disciplined about this stuff. But hopefully in a year.
I feel like my answer is going to be lame compared to everyone else's, but I just want to see more accessibility and more apps. I have already been blown away with the number of people who have come up to me and been like, oh, like I didn't really consider mobile and accessibility before. It's like obvious on web. I want to see it start to be obvious on mobile. And I feel like I'm in the same boat where I haven't really even explored with the TV and all the other different elements that we start getting in React Native. I'm like, I want to do that. Like, I want to see where those next steps are and start having more and more be accessible.
I guess I'd like to see more cross-platform apps. So I think code sharing, because we're JavaScript developers, most of us, TypeScript developers, let's be honest, ultimately, and we're writing now React on the web, and then React on mobile, and then Node.js on our APIs, and we even often interact with our database layer in JSON. So it's all the same language, and we're using React Native, which has integrations for TV and Android and iOS and web, and so code sharing, like a really high amount of code sharing while maintaining the native capabilities and look and feel is starting to come more and more of a possibility, because code sharing always used to be kind of a trade-off. It's like, yeah, you share, but in one or more platforms you have a suboptimal experience. So I think it's going to be more and more possible to code share between all the layers, like cross-platform. So native, web, API, and I think that's what I'm hoping to see from next year.
Yes, I think this was supposed to be like a quick round, but because we have a couple more minutes, I wanted to ask about that actually. Do you see server components playing a role in that? essentially like, making it more performant and easier to generate sort of like very specific payloads for different platforms without having to bundle all of it in? Or like, is that a completely sort of orthogonal concern, as we say in the business?
I think they certainly play a role, but server components aren't going to be the answer to everything, and also they're not going to be a fit for every single application. So one thing to remember is that server components inherently need a server and an interconnection. So when you have a native app, one of the benefits of having an app on your phone is that it runs without an internet connection or in low internet. So server components absolutely have a major role to play, but they are not the only big player that are going to make this happen.
That makes sense. No, sorry, Christoph, I interrupted you. I hope you still invite me back next year. But
yeah, so this is kind of related to what Kari spoke, I think, for me, and I'd like to see in specifically React Native converging with web more, in the sense like actually in two aspects. So one is just like the API conversion, and the second one is just bringing more developers to React Native. We'll have to welcome them here, and of course like. And since I'm with the organizers, I can also say the second thing I'd like for the next year. So for the next year, I'd like to have Yanni here, but doing his React Native comeback, so working on React Native stuff.
All right, well, thank you very much. I think, we are now at time, and I think everybody's already hunkering to go to the after party. So maybe we'll let you go, maybe we'll let them go, and we'll continue this conversation over a drink at the after party. Sound good? All right. Thank you very much for our panel.